All right. Only meeting host. Yeah, no, only meeting host. That's good. Okay, good. All right. Okay. Welcome to Faith and Calm. This is class number 278. Welcome to all the new subscribers. And good. We'll get started because there's a lot to cover this week. Because it's just for me personally, the Parshas of Bereshit with the stories about family life and so forth are just so relevant, interesting, useful for yourself and for your family, everything else. And this week deal with we really get into the nitty gritty of family life. So I was listening to Rabbi YY, who was basically paraphrasing the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Likutei Sichos, volume 20, Parshas Toldos, and this Parsha, Parshas Vayetze, and I'll translate. So anyway, this is that's the Torah reading that we read last week and this week. So these are all based on what the Rebbe said, but with a little bit of ad lib and my own little spin how I understand what I've been learning. So the first thing to understand is that the stories that we read about our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, etc., these stories are not stories that are like bedtime stories. Bedtime stories are meant to put you to sleep. So that everything ends happily ever after. Most of the stories in Chumash are ones that will cause you to be wondering what was going on and why was this happening. And there's the story in this week's Parsha, which definitely falls into that category. What am I talking about? The marriage of Yaakov and to Rachel and to Leah and to Bilhah and Zilpah. got married, he got married, he got married, he got married. What was going on there? Why was he marrying so many? And what was there? And then, of course, the whole story, I think we're familiar with, but let me just give the background again. So, Yaakov is the third of the forefathers. He had to leave his father's house, Yitzchak, because his brother was ready to kill him, Esav, because he stole the birthright. And he all right. I'm just reading the superficial version of the story. Okay. Yes, the deeper story is we suppose it was belonged to him anyway. But that's how Esav looked at it. So he was after him. He flew back. He went back to his uncle's house in Mesopotamia, Haran. Actually, there's a town there that they think they still know what it is, where they think the well was in Iraq. And Iraq, I guess it would be. He was told to go look for a wife, and he found one at the well, Rachel. And he told his uncle, he said, "This is my cousin. I love her, and I'll work for you for 7 years." And he says, "Okay, better to give it to you. Keep it in the family." And after 7 years, there was the wedding. So after the wedding, Lavan led his daughter to Yaakov, but he didn't tell him he was doing a big switch, Aru. He was actually switching Rachel with Leah. And the tradition is you cover the bride, so he didn't know who was coming into the room. And it was dark at night, I guess. And so the entire night he was with Leah, and they were married. And then in the morning, it was dawn, and he opened his eyes. He saw the sun, and he goes, "Oops, wrong girl." And he goes running to his father-in-law to ask, "Why did you deceive me? Why did you cheat me out? We had an agreement here, Rachel." And Lavan tells him, he says, "We don't do that. That's not the way we do things in this country. So we always give the older one first and then the younger one. So you're dealing with a swindler, because when you tell him you swindled me, he starts making you feel like you're the one who's doing something immoral." So that's Lavan. he's really the classic swindler. Anyway, So, and then Yaakov works for another 7 years for Rachel, which he gets right away after 7 days, but he has to still work another 7 years. So that's the story in the Chumash. We all know that particular story. But what I want you to focus on tonight is, Yaakov woke up. He looked. He saw it was Leah. And then he went out of the tent and he had to find Lavan. You think he didn't talk to Leah beforehand? He probably did. And in fact, the Medrash actually tells us and fills in the blanks to tell us what was going on, what happened that morning when he woke up. So it says, the Medrash says, the Medrash fills in the story for you. So the Medrash says that Yaakov first said, hey, listen, all night long, I was calling your name. I mean, that's what you do. I waited for 7 years. I was saying, Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. And you were saying, yes, 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 Rachel, yeah, Rachel, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he said, why did you deceive me? I mean, I was calling you Rachel and you are Leah. Why didn't you tell me that you were Leah? And so the Medrash says, well, she answered back. She says, well, I was just doing what you do, you went into your, I'm not, oh yeah, this is the other point. Yaakov said, you're just like your father. He's a swindler. He's a cheat. And you also did the same thing to me. I was saying Rachel and you were saying, yes, yes. You were pretending like we were Leah. I mean, Rachel. And so Leah says back to him, she's a sharp cookie. She says, listen, I didn't do anything that you don't do. I mean, you just had this dealing with your father and Esav, and he kept asking, are you Esav? And you said yes. So I did the same thing. In fact, we learned it from you. I mean, you think we're swindlers? I mean, every master of a craft has a teacher. So we learned from you how to cheat. So, it's, you don't have anything to hold over us, what comes around goes around, and you did the same thing to your father, then the same thing here. In fact, all the details actually work out almost the same. It was, Yitzhak couldn't see, and it was dark, and you couldn't see, okay, same event. And then also, it was your mother and you teaming up against your brother. In this case, it was my father and me teaming up against you. So it's all even, Stephen. Well, it's an interesting story. Where is this just like, did the rabbis just make this up? I mean, do you see any place in the Chumash that actually hints at this was the actual background story that was happening? So what I'm going to show you is, yes, there are hundreds of clues that this is not just entertainment, an interesting story, a wild story. It actually is, and when we understand it, we'll understand a lot more about what was happening with the first marriage and the first marriage ceremony, first wedding among the Jewish people. Okay, so how do we understand this? How do we understand this story with Leah?
Yitzhak, what's going on? Are you okay?
Okay, 1 second. I gotta mute. Okay. So the let me get the transition right here. So there's an interesting thing about this whole about when you read in the Chumash. And it goes as follows, the story in the Chumash says that it was morning, and behold, he, which in the Hebrew word is she was Leah, not Rachel. But in the actual Chumash itself, this happens occasionally in very rare places, but it does happen a couple places, that the actual letters and the vowels are not the same as what we say when we read the Chumash. And this is one of those cases. It actually says, Vahu Leah. It wasn't say he, it says the male. It says he was Leah. Now, how do we understand this? What do you mean he was Leah? It wasn't a he, it was she. What is the Chumash trying to tell you?
You should explain if people don't understand that he in Hebrew is she.
Yeah. Okay.
And who is him?
Okay. If you heard that, so interesting thing about
Who is
Hebrew.
he and he is she?
Hebrew, we say he is she, and who is her is he. So and that's the words in Hebrew. So okay. So that's very confusing. It wasn't the he. Okay, but that's going to be an important point. Another interesting point about this whole story is that it says um, that when it introduces Leah, it says that Leah was a girl whose eyes were soft or were crying or weak or something of that sort. The word is rachav. The weak had weak eyes or crying eyes, weak soft eyes. And when it describes Rachel, it says that she was beautiful of face and beautiful of countenance. And the question is, why is it telling us this? And they were identical twins. So why was it so important to tell us this particular detail? So the Medrash actually fills in the blank and says that the reason why Leah's eyes were soft was she was busy crying. She was crying because the entire world was saying, you know what? There's a match here. You know, Lavan and Rivka are brother and sister. So these are two first cousins. Now she has two kids. They're both girls. Yitzhak has two boys, Esav and Yaakov. So the older boy should go for the older girl, and the younger girl should go for the younger guy. It's a perfect match. First cousins. And so she was worried that she was going to be the wife of Esav, and she heard what kind of a person he is. And she was crying and begging Hashem that this shouldn't happen. Now, there's a problem with here. And the Rebbe brings it out. And he says, in those times, and in our times too, you don't marry a girl without her consent. We even had it last week in the Parsha. When Lavan and his mother asked Rivka, are you going to go and marry this guy Yitzhak? And she said, yes, I'm going to go. In other words, you have to ask the girl before you marry her. This whole idea of arranged marriages or just forced marriages, it doesn't happen in Judaism. It doesn't happen even with non-Jews because they were, Lavan was not a Jewish. So he even realized that the rule is you got to ask the girl. So how are you forcing Leah to marry Esav? She couldn't be forced. She had to be asked, and she could have said no.
That's a good question.
And more than that, what is this whole business of the whole world was saying? What do you mean? Rashi even quotes it. The whole world was saying that, the older to the older and the younger to the younger. What is the whole world? I mean, were the people in WhatsApp in Indonesia saying this? Were the people in the United States saying this? What do you mean the whole world? All of Mesopotamia, all of Israel, all the Canaanim were saying this? Everybody was talking about, why do you say the whole world was saying this whole business? All the people in Evergreen Kosher and Muncie were saying it, maybe, that's what it means, the whole world. Okay. Ouch, 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 ouch. So, the whole world. Okay. So, it's, it is, okay. So it's, the Rashi is hinting you at a deeper thing. And that is that there was a certain vibe in this world that Leah picked up was and saying, yes, this is the right thing. The older one to the younger one, the older one, the younger one to the younger one. But the question is, why was that the right thing? And why was that the world, the reality of the universe was saying this is the way it's supposed to go? And so she was basically arguing against God's reality. But how does she know that? And how does she sense that? So to explore these two ideas, we have to understand something a little bit about the distinction between what is about Esav and about Leah, and what does this mean that her eyes were weak, and why was she weeping? So what do we know about Esav? Well, one thing we know about Esav, he was a wild guy, but he was a wild guy in an interesting way. He was wild from birth. In fact, he was wild even before birth. We know the story with Rivka that whenever she would pass by a house of Avodah Zarah, an idolatrous house, she felt a tugging to go that way. And she was told that because you got somebody in your womb and he's gravitating to idolatry and all sorts of averas even before he's born. And therefore, we were going to call him Esav, the wicked person, the bad one. But let me ask you a question. Is somebody wicked just because he was born with a genetic disposition to something evil? It wasn't his choice. I mean, good and bad means that a human chooses it. You can't be bad if you were designed that way. You're not bad because you're a leopard and you like to eat raw animals, and so forth. And you were built that way. So Esav was built this way by God. So if you want to blame anybody, it's God's choice that he was going to be like this. So why do we say that Esav was bad? And this is a very important idea that in Judaism that we have to learn. And that's one of the lessons that we learned from the Parsha last week. And that is that a disposition to an inclination towards bad, an inclination towards evil doesn't make you evil. You were built that way. It's giving you something to struggle against. Esav was given a challenge. He was given a personality that was going to be very difficult. But God was saying, I also give you the capability to overcome it. And your path to glory and holiness will not be identical to Yaakov. Yaakov will find life easy and good and easy to be a tzaddik. You will be you have a different path in life, and that doesn't make you bad. It just means that for some reason, this is going to be a difficult life to live. But if you overcome it, you will become great. There is a Hasidic master. His name was the Shar. The Shar Hechels, I think he was called. The Shar Bracha. And he wrote in his book, he said, you know what? Actually, Esav was destined, if he would overcome his inclinations, he would have been 1,000 times greater than Yaakov, because Yaakov had the same soul as Moshe, but Esav had the ability to become on the level of Mashiach. And he was going to be, if he had overcome it, if he had worked on himself, if he had struggled and improved himself, he would have been that way, because the key to the safe of Esav's life was going to be through fighting against his inclination and overcoming it. And that takes a lot of power and strength. And Esav had that power and strength. The problem is that he didn't see it that way. He saw it as, I'm bad, I'm incorrigibly bad, and I have to give in to my bad traits. But that was a failure, and that was a disaster, because he went downhill because of that, and he did terrible things. But God was not, but people who are given big challenges in life, that doesn't necessarily make them bad. It just means that they have a bigger struggle. I heard Rabbi Waiwa, he was talking about this, and he says back in many, I guess in the 80s or something like that, he visited a town, and there was a bacher who had a letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And this bacher wrote the Rebbe, and he said, I have a trait, and I don't like it at all. I have an attraction to people of the same sex. And why am I cursed with this thing? And the Rebbe wrote back to him a very interesting 3-4 page letter back in the 80s. And the Rebbe was very, very, very warm and very sympathetic with him. And he told him a couple things like, there is this concept of neuroplasticity. And that is that, don't just assume that you have a particular trait, that you're fixed that way. People do change these capabilities, and psychology recognizes it. So it's not like you're born a particular way or not a particular way, but you can be born with a challenge. And what I'll tell you is, and the Rebbe says, and you'll see if it resonates with you, and if it does, good. And he says sometimes people are born with a particular special power and capability, but because God doesn't give them for free, they have to fight various challenges. But when they overcome that, they create a light for the entire world. And that's what the Rebbe wrote him is, sometimes people are given a tremendous challenge. So let's go back to Leah. So why was Leah's eyes weeping and so forth? Because Leah also had the same trait and so forth. She also had something they have to challenge with. She was not a Rachel. A Rachel means a lamb. And if you know anything about lambs, they're very docile. They're all white. They're very placid and so forth. when somebody wants to call somebody in Yiddish, a girl a nice name, they call her a shepsela, because that's a nice calm animal. They don't call her Camela or Labela. Well, Label would be a lion, but that would be, but that's a boy's name. But anyway, they call her shepsela, meaning that she's a nice sheep and so forth, so forth. That was Rachel. And she was the perfect match for Yaakov because he was also a perfect, innocent, clean, never deviating from the path kind of guy and so forth. So they said perfect. And Leah had the challenges. She's the girl who has all sorts of, well, let's look at it this way. When you have to write a resume and you have to put down your traits, you say, I'm organized, I get things done, I'm a balabusta, I do a lot of stuff. You don't say, I have a lot of fears at night, and I have issues with my parents, and I have, a difficult personality, and sometimes I flow off the handle, and people ask me to do things, and I get all out of sorts and so forth because they think I'm overwhelmed and things like that. You don't put that on your resume. Nobody wants to hear about it. But Leah had those challenges. Leah had a difficult personality, and therefore they said the person who's going to understand Esav and is going to help Esav the best is somebody who's like him, who understands how it means to be challenged and have difficulties. So the older one was perfect because she will be a good life partner for Esav. She will help him because she'll actually understand him when he has all these challenges. And that's what the world was saying. The world was saying, meaning she sensed this, that she really was for Esav. But the problem was she was hearing how Esav was dealing with it. And she said, that's not bad, God. I'm struggling with this, but I'm overcoming it. And Esav is not. So she didn't want to fall in his lap. Okay. So now let's go back to that story of, that wedding night and so forth. When Leah was saying to Yaakov was the following, when it says, "Oh, behold, he was Esav." What do you? He was Leah.
She was Leah.
But it said he, not she.
Who?
He was Leah. Yeah. She was saying, you know what? Here's the story. Your brother was not living up to his challenges. Your mother saw that. And your mother saw that he was not going to be able to be a partner with you and to become the partner in the Jewish people. So she said, you're going to have to be the Esav. And so she dressed you up as Esav, and you went into your father and you said you're Esav. And now you have that trait. You have the Esav in you. And therefore, I am now your mate because you are a composition of both things. And that is really the truth in many of us in life. People get married and they have this idea of my perfect partner, and they marry them because they're the perfect partner. And then they get married to Rachel, and they find out that they've actually married somebody who's a little bit of Leah inside of them and has problems and has issues. And now that you're married to her, you have to figure out how to live together and so forth. You didn't expect it. And by the way, this is not only in marriage, this is also with oneself. And that's what the title of this class is. We both have these traits of the Leah and the Rachel inside of ourselves. And we think that we're a particular thing. And then all of a sudden we find out that we have certain emotional baggage and fears and things that come out, especially when we get married, and somebody hits our funny bone, and all of a sudden we behave in very bizarre ways that we're not even proud of ourselves. And that's the Rachel and the Leah inside of ourselves. And that's what Yaakov was learning was, as Jewish people, we're going to both have times where we're a Rachel and times when we're a Leah, times when we're good and times when we're dark. And the way to get to our brightness is through the darkness. And that's what Leah was saying. Now we have to work together, and we have to actually, I am your partner because you have both inside of you. And through this, we will eventually get to the Rachel level, to the Mashiach level, where we'll actually be calm. But you have to work with your dark sides in order to get to your bright side. And that's what Leah was saying to Esav. I am your partner. And interestingly enough, most of his life, Yaakov spent with Leah because Rachel died young. And in fact, he's even buried with Leah and not with Rachel. So, he was his partner. He was his partner because he did have to work through those things. And Leah was the right partner in life to help him get to that level. And that's the same thing with us. We are able to become marriage partners when we start not pretending like we're perfect, but actually facing up to our difficulties and our darkness. And that actually explains a very bizarre custom that we have till this day. When a person gets married, they have this thing called the bedekin, where you cover over the bride. And therefore, when you stand under the chuppah and you put the ring on the bride, she's covered over. So what are we trying to do? Cause the same problem that we had the first marriage when we had Yaakov married Leah because he didn't know who it was? And what we're actually saying when we do this is he's saying, you know what? You're not just marrying the Rachel that you love and you think is the perfect partner and so forth. You have to be ready to also realize that a marriage, you're going to find also there's Leah inside of you and there's Leah inside of your partner. And you got to work, together to be able to, yeah, what? There's water here. Okay. You're going to have to work through both of these things, the difficult parts of your personality and your good part, and that's how you're going to be able to get the marriage. So, do we answer all the questions here now? And did you actually see the connections? So we talked about the funny thing is who he is Leah. Well, we explained that. We explained a little bit about Rachel and about Leah, and the one is a lamb and one is a little bit wild. Actually, there's another interesting thing about it. It says the word Leah means exhausted. We had it in a couple parshas before, in the parsha of Stone, where the people were searching to try and find the door, and it says they were worn out. They were worn out. So Leah means worn out. Now, why do you call a person worn out? And the answer is that struggling with yourself and working with your dark side, that's very difficult. And living with that is very difficult. And so it wears you out. It's very challenging sometimes with ourselves. And by the way, who else was called worn out or exhausted? Who else in the Chumash did this describe as only one person and only one man is ever called that in the entire Chumash? You know where it is? The word for Hebrew is ayef. Who's called ayef in any of the parshas? Does anybody know? Somebody comes and says he's ayef.
It's Esav.
Esav. So that's why they're matched for each other. And in fact, he says, feed me. Why? Why do people eat? Why do people stuff themselves? Because they're dealing with a lot of cognitive dissonance. And not because they're hungry or they like the food. It's because they're thinking that the food is somehow going to be an answer to all the problems and so forth. So if they just eat and eat and eat and it's a pleasurable experience, then they're going to actually be kind. So this was Esav. You can see it in his personality, and he was the match for Leah because he was Ayef. And he was also a goat, which a goat is not like a sheep, and you don't mix a sheep together with a Rachel. So he was, Esav is considered to be like Seir. He's a sheep, so a goat. So therefore, he also is the one for Leah. So all of these things are hinted to in the parsha. So the Medrash is not making up some sort of bizarre, wild story. It's actually telling you the background in a story form of actually what the Chumash was actually saying and bringing all these details together. Esav was exhausted. Esav was Ayef. Leah was exhausted, and they were a match for each other. So all of these little details are all coming together, and that's how we see actually the Medrash actually flows together. I thought this was just fascinating because I never saw how these connections go between. It's hinted to in the Chumash, but it's really you have to put it in story form to actually see it. So
can I ask a question, please?
Okay, do you want to be recorded or not? Yes, you can, if it's good.
It's okay. It's okay if it's okay.
Yeah, go.
So I probably my internet was interrupting itself, so I probably missed the most important part. If you can put in one or two sentences. So what are the parts that everyone, I guess, male and female, has from Rachel and Leah, knowing that Rachel was very good character, compassionate, sacrificed for her sister, and knowing that Leah, I don't remember that Leah is described as compassionate. I don't know, but what are the parts from Leah? I assume that it's not the same as Yetzer Hara or Yetzer Tov, so it means that additionally to Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov that everybody has, additionally to that, we also have these parts from Leah and Rachel. Could you put in 1-2 sentences what are these parts?
Well, the question took more than 2 sentences. So I don't know if I can put this in 2 sentences.
I don't want to take time.
So, but
Just a summary.
yeah. But what we were saying was that we learned that that Leah was the perfect partner for Esav because Esav was a very troubled character, but a troubled character not because he was genetically inclined with all sorts of challenges and so forth. He had traits that were planted in him by God, but not to stumble him, but actually to achieve his greatness. Because the worst thing you can do to one child is tell him that, you should be just like your brother, and so forth. He's perfect and you have all these challenges. He's not here. He's his brother. He needs his own path to reach godliness, and his path to reaching godliness and to find himself is going to be his own path. So Esav had these things. So we made a hekesh, we made a connection between that and Leah. Now, Leah was not challenged with doing all sorts of terrible things, but we do know that people do have tremendous psychological challenges and burdens and fears and phobias and they throw emotional tantrums, and you just go down the list of things that people have to struggle with. And they wonder, why am I not just a simple, easygoing person, who's all I care about is shopping and taking care of kids or something like that? Well, no, because you have, a lot of complex personality things going on inside of you. And that we are saying that was Leah's challenge. Her challenge was not negative, but her challenge was a lot of dirt. And by the way, then we all have that. That's why she was perfect match for Yaakov. That's what we're saying, is we have these dual personalities, the easy, simple parts of ourselves and the parts of ourselves that we sometimes try and hide, but we don't pay attention to them, saying, I have, I have trouble with family members and they're troublesome to me and they just hit my funny bone and I act crazy because of that, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to go over the whole class. You can listen to it again.
I understand later. Now.
Yeah. Okay. So,
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I guess Yaakov was perfect for her because I guess it's my guess only. So he knew how to deal with challenges of Leah's character.
Right. Well, he took it on. So we said, Leah would be the perfect one for Esav because she knew what those challenges were. And we said that Yaakov was the perfect for Rachel. But because Yaakov took on the mantle of Esav and pretended to be him and actually took on his clothes and became part of him. So therefore, he symbolizes the Jew who from the time of Yaakov onwards, he has both these things inside of him, and we have to all deal with both characteristics. We are not all one thing or the other, and pretending to be a perfect, yeshiva bacher, a perfect meidalach, and pretending to be, and then the other parts don't exist in ourselves, is really the recipe for all the crying and weeping and disasters, because we're living in a cognitive dissonant way. We're not really paying attention to all these personality parts inside of ourselves. And that's what causes really the biggest pain and challenges on ourselves. And so that's one thing that I think you learned from this class, is that, it's very relevant. It's relevant to all of us who it's very healthy for us to also to face up these things. Okay.
It could be whole separate lesson on Jewish psychology.
Yeah.
Whole separate lesson.
Yep. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Hope this was good. And
yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay. And so I'm going to try and keep it short because yesterday's was a little longer than usual. I'm just going to get my glasses. And does anybody have anything they want to say before I begin? Okay. So
just thank you for being there.
So I want to start with the 4 things that I always say. Number 1, we're in an extraordinary time. We are in the unveiling we're in the time of the redemption. We are the redemption is unfolding more and more. And how do I know this? I know this because the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was never wrong about any of the amazing predictions that he made said that not predictions, statements. He said that we've already entered the days of Mashiach, and and we're going to see more. We're going to see it. So the second thing is that you and I were handpicked to be in this time, this amazing time, because we have a vital role to play. We're not bystanders. We each have our own incredibly important role to play. Number three, we were given all the tools that we need. We have the Torah, which is our guidebook, and we have mitzvahs, which are our power tools. Which I'm fond of saying that mitzvahs are power tools not only to change the world, but they uncover the real you. They make you more you than you ever dreamed you could be. And finally, what we're doing tonight, learning about Mashiach, is the fastest way to speed it up. That's what the Rebbe told us. It's if you want the process to go faster, learn about it. So I'm going to tell a short story. Yes, Kulshim spoke a little bit longer than usual, so I'm going to tell a very brief story about a friend of Yehezkel Shimons. And the story it was in the 70s. And the person I'm talking about, his name is Rabbi Benny Nachum. He comes to Boston quite often to fundraise for his Chabad house in a place called Shlomi in northern Israel. Now, he picked that place, however it happened that he ended up there, without realizing. First of all, it's a very dangerous place because it's on the northern border of Israel. There's a lot of bombs that fall there. And because it's not the most it might be very desirable in its own essence, but people are afraid to move there because of the heavy action that goes on there, heavy attacks from the north. So people end up there who are maybe not society's most desirable people. There was a lot of at least in the 70s, there were a lot of people who lived rough lives up there. And when he built his Chabad house, he opened his Chabad house. He opened it on a nice street. There was another shul on the same street. There was a school with 550 kids on the same street. But he had no idea that directly across from the Chabad house, there was a major drug dealing center. And the drug dealers had tremendous impunity. They were afraid of nothing. It was really quite an amazing thing. And he would watch in amazement. You could see openly people going in there, paying, coming out with their little sacks of drugs. And the police also were watching, but for some reason, I don't know, maybe they were, I don't know why, but they were just watching from a distance. So the guy, the head, I don't know what you call him, the head drug dealer, decided he didn't want all these people watching him. And so he built a large wall in front of the old house that they had renovated to make it into this drug center. He built a large wall so people couldn't watch what he was doing. And the police came and they said, "You have no permit for such a structure. We're going to take down the whole thing." And he was furious. He was absolutely furious. And they actually got into a fight. The police were fighting the drug dealers. They were physically fighting. And they ended up arresting the head drug dealer. And for some reason, they let him out a week later. And what happened? He was so mad. They demolished the big wall. And what the drug dealers were so mad that instead they erected this huge sign. And the huge sign had all sorts of profanity on it, all sorts of horrible language, and a picture of the mayor. And these guys were so brave; it's unbelievable. And this rabbi who's across the street, this Chabad Shaliach Benny Nachum, he's horrified. I'm going to have all this profanity directly across from my Chabad house, so close to this school with 550 kids and another synagogue. This is not happening on my street. And he walked across the street and he tore down the enormous sign. He tore it right down. And people were like, oh my gosh. And his congregants pulled him into the shul. They were afraid for his life. They didn't know what was going to happen. And they came looking for him, the bad guys, the gangsters, whatever you want to call them. They were Jews. Let's not call them bad guys. Let's just call them confused and with a lot of chutzpah. And they came looking for him. And they said, who tore down our sign? Who tore it down? And he came out and he said, I tore it down. And they said, you tore down our sign? They said, you have? They said to him, do you know you're playing with fire? And he said to them, you're playing with fire. How dare you put up such a sign in Eretz Israel, the Holy Land, and right across from my Chabad house and right across from this school? What are you thinking of? And what are you thinking of? So I left out the beginning of the story. There's a when sorry, I'm going to go to the parsha for just a second and then come back to the story. In the parsha from last week, Vayetze, when Yaakov runs off, he ends up on a mountain, right? Everybody knows the story. He ends up on a mountain, and the sun goes down, and he's a little bit frightened. He surrounds himself with rocks. He doesn't know. He thinks it's a dangerous place. It happens to be the site of the future Beis Hamikdash, but he doesn't know that. And he woke up. Before he woke up, he had an amazing dream. Hashem talked to him and said, I'm going to protect you wherever you go. Don't worry about it. And he woke up and he said, Achin, yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. Wow, Hashem was in this place and I didn't know. So, point is, Hashem is in every place. And even in the most unlikely places, for Yaakov, that was an unlikely place. He was afraid. He had to surround himself with stones. So when this guy Benny Nachum, when he's encountering these thugs, these drug dealers, and they're telling him, you're playing with fire, and he shot right back, you're playing with fire. This is the Holy Land. How dare you do this? And he comes closer. He comes into their courtyard. And they're leading him they're leading him into their place. The people in his congregation are plotting. They're so worried for him, and they're following at a distance, but they're so scared for the rabbi. And he goes into their place and he looks around and he says, "I don't know why all this trouble is happening to you guys." And the leader says, "No." Well, he said, "No, what?" And he says, all this trouble is happening to you because you have no mezuzahs in this place. No wonder you guys are in so much trouble. And the leader of these gangsters says, "Rabbi, you never came over and gave us mezuzahs." And so he says, "Oh, 1 minute." He ran across. He ran back to his house. And he said, "I'll be back. We're neighbors. After all, we're neighbors." And he came with a bunch of mezuzahs. And he started nailing the first one in the wall and saying the bracha, and the head of the gangsters is repeating after him word for word for word. They became bosom buddies. He eventually started putting on tefillin, and after a while, the police got their courage up and they actually arrested him. They threw him in jail for 3 years, and he emerged a frum guy, a totally frum guy. And he now runs a supermarket in that same town of Shloimeh. And it's because that Rabbi Nachum, he had the courage to understand that even in the heart of darkness, his whole congregation was afraid he was not going to come out with a head and feet. And instead, in that place, he said, he knew Hashem is in this place too. So why don't you have mezuzahs in here? I don't get it. And that's what we have to do when we encounter somebody. Let's say we encounter somebody, a Jew, but we're getting a lot of trouble for that from them, or any Jew. So we're getting a lot of trouble from them. We have to remember, you know what? Hashem is here. Hashem is here, and this is a Jew. And this is not the simple black and white situation that I think it is. And so too with all the situations in our life, no matter how dark or black they seem, Hashem is there. Hashem is there. And he's just waiting he's waiting for us to recognize that and act based on that. So I'm gonna close with that. And if anybody, I'm gonna turn off the recording. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to hear them.